Alrighty, the next bit that we're going to have is buying and selling shares, and this is where you get to look at the processes that we need to do to buy and sell shares on the market. Okay, buying shares is pretty cool. When you buy shares, you need to calculate how much it will cost you to buy the shares, which is pretty simple. You need to take into account the cost of the shares, the brokerage, and the GST. Cost of the shares is called the consideration. The brokerage is a fee that the brokers charge you to carry out the transaction for you, and GST is just the goods and services tax, which is 10%. Some brokers charge a fixed fee. Internet transactions tend to do this. So instead of having a percentage, it'll just be a flat fee. Most brokers charge a percentage of the price of the shares, okay, which is pretty fair. Make sure you do every single one of the steps, which I'll show you next, to get the questions right. Because if you jump, you can make mistakes, and once you make a mistake in some of these questions that are quite long, they'll just keep on rolling. So, cost of the shares. The consideration is the total value of the shares timed by the price. So the number of shares you're going to buy timed by the price. The broker's fee is added on there, and GST is 10% of the brokerage. Now that might sound a bit gobbledygookish, but let's have a look at an example. Okay, calculate how much it will cost you to purchase 5,500 AMP shares at $3.20 each. Brokerage is 2%, and a GST of 10% is applied to brokerage. Your standard buying of shares question. Okay, so the first thing we do is consideration. I'd even write down the word consideration, or con, or C, so you know what it is. There's 5,500 shares at $3.20 each, which gives you $17,600. That is your consideration. Your brokerage is 2% of your consideration. So 2% times $17,600, $352. Your GST is then 10% of your brokerage. So 10% of $352 gives you $35.20. Your total is all of them added up, because you're buying the shares, all your fees and charges get added on. So $17,600, sorry, $352, $35.20 gives you $17,987.20 to buy those shares. Okay, they're valued at $17,600, but it costs you $17,987.20 because you have these fees and charges added in. You've got some questions to do now. On page 6 of your booklet, there is some questions 1, 3, and 5. Okay, 1, 3, and 5 on page 6 would be really cool to do. Make sure you follow all the steps, and make sure that you don't jump ahead. Work it out slowly and write down the headings for consideration, brokerage, and GST. When you sell your shares, the only difference is that you take away the fees and charges. So you've got your consideration, you take away your brokerage, and then you take away your GST. Okay, it's not that tricky. It's just that when you're selling something, you've got to take away your cost. When you buy something, you've got to add it in. So let's have a look at an example. Calculate how much you would receive if you sold your 7,500 AMP shares at $4.20 each. Your brokerage is 2.5%, and you've got a 10% GST. So you're selling 7,500 shares, $4.20, 2.5%, 10% GST. So once again, write down consideration, which is 7,500 times $4.20, gives you $31,500. Your brokerage is 2.5% times by your $31,500, which gives you $787.50. Then your GST is 10 times 787.5, gives you that. And then at the end, the difference is you go 31,500, take 787.50, take 78.75. Okay, so they're takeaway. Don't add them, otherwise you kind of end up in a pickle. So you'll end up getting $30,633.75. So even though once again you're selling for $31,500, because you've got these fees and charges in there, you put in your pocket $30,633.75. Now of course there's questions to do. On page 6, question 1, 3 and 5 of 7C2. Alrighty.